On that day, I lost my daughter to heaven, my husband to another woman, and my dignity to the monster who created me. Seems like too much punishment for one person, doesn't it? But life doesn't ask if we can handle it before unleashing the storm. My name is Constance Anderson. I'm 79 years old, and here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, everyone knows me as Miss Connie, the lady who sells handmade quilts at the farmer's market and always has fresh coffee for friends who stop by. The younger folks call me Grandma Connie, even though I'm not their grandmother. They say I have that grandmotherly way about me, with my white hair pulled back in a loose bun and these wrinkled hands that never stop working. Few people know what happened to me 45 years ago. It's a wound that still bleeds today, even after all this time. Before I continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching my life story from. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel and like this video too. It was 1980, I was 34 years old with two beautiful children, Michael, 10, and Annie, 8. And what I thought was a good marriage to Joseph Carter, a postal worker. We lived in a housing development on the outskirts of Memphis, Tennessee, a simple but tidy house with a small backyard where I grew herbs and some flowers. I wasn't rich, but we weren't struggling either. I worked as a nursing assistant at a clinic near our home, didn't earn much, but it supplemented Joseph's income. Annie was a special child, one of those who seemed to have more light than others. From a young age, she had kidney problems. She was born with a condition called nephrotic syndrome, which caused her to swell up occasionally, requiring expensive medications and frequent hospital visits. Despite all this, I never saw a happier child. She had a smile that just grabbed you, you know? And a laugh that was pure music. She loved dancing, even when she was so swollen she could barely put on her little shoes. She would twirl around the living room singing to Elvis Presley songs playing on the radio. Michael, being older, was her protector. Wherever Annie went, he followed, watching over her, making her laugh. That year, Annie started getting worse. The swelling became more frequent, and the medications weren't having the same effect. Dr. Emanuel, the clinic doctor, managed to refer us to a specialist at the university hospital. That's where we received the news that changed everything. Annie needed a kidney transplant. It was an expensive and risky procedure, especially back then. But the doctor said there was a new government program that could cover the costs. We just needed to find a compatible donor. Joseph was tested first. He wasn't a match. I was tested next. My blood type was the same, but the other tests showed I wasn't compatible enough. Michael was too young to donate. We tried with my mother and father who lived in rural Kentucky. My mother had diabetes and couldn't be a donor. My father, well, he was compatible, but he refused. Said he was afraid that he wouldn't get cut open for his granddaughter. That was the first major disappointment of that phase. We got on the waiting list for a donor. The doctors said it could take time, but if we maintained the rigorous treatment, Annie would have a chance. And so we continued, between hope and fear, counting each day as a victory. In the last week of July, on a Sunday night, Annie suddenly became very ill. High fever, vomiting, pain that made her scream. We rushed to the nearest hospital, but they didn't have a nephrologist on duty. They transferred us by ambulance to University Hospital downtown. On the way, she had a seizure that froze my soul. I'll never forget her little body trembling like that, her eyes rolling back, the helplessness I felt. When we arrived, dawn was breaking. The doctors immediately took her to the ICU. The infection had spread rapidly, attacking what remained of her kidneys and beginning to compromise other organs. The doctor on duty, a young man who looked exhausted, said they would try everything, but the situation was critical, that I should prepare for the worst. How does a mother prepare to lose a child? Please tell me, because even now, with nearly 80 years behind me, I still haven't learned how. Joseph had gone to work, leaving Michael with the neighbor. I promised I'd call if there was any news. The hours passed, each minute a torment. Sitting in that hard chair in the waiting room, I prayed every prayer I knew, bargained with every saint, promised everything I could and couldn't in exchange for my daughter's life. Around 3 in the afternoon, the doctor returned. He didn't need to say anything. His face told the whole story. Annie was gone. My little star, my angel with golden curls, was no longer in this world. What happens when you receive news like this is strange. First comes a cold emptiness, as if someone had ripped out your insides and left only a hole. Then comes a noise in your ears, a buzzing that seems like it will last forever. Some people scream, others collapse on the floor. I was paralyzed. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream. I just stared at the doctor as if he were speaking a foreign language that I didn't understand. "Can I see her?" was all I managed to say after a while. They took me to where she was. They had already removed the tubes, cleaned the blood. She looked like she was sleeping. Curls spread on the pillow, mouth slightly open, as it would be when she napped on the couch after playing too much. But there was no movement. No rising and falling of her little chest breathing. Just a silence that weighed tons. I sat beside her, took her still warm little hand in mine. I sang softly that lullaby she loved, the same one I sang the day she was born. I don't know how long I stayed there. It could have been minutes or hours. Time had lost all meaning. A nurse appeared, gentle but firm, saying they needed to take the body. Body. What a horrible word to refer to my little girl, my Annie. "I need to call my husband," I said, thinking about how I would break the news. How do you tell a father that his daughter is gone? The nurse took me to a phone at the nursing station. I called the post office, asked to speak with Joseph. The receptionist, after making me wait an eternity, came back saying he had left early, that he wasn't there. I found that strange. Joseph never left work early. He was methodical, disciplined, sometimes too much so. I called home. No one answered. I called the neighbor who was with Michael. She said she hadn't seen Joseph, that Michael was fine and playing with her son. I started to worry. What if something had happened to him too? What if he had an accident on his way to the hospital? America was going through a difficult time of increasing violence, express kidnappings. 1,000 possibilities ran through my head. The bureaucratic part was the cruelest. Filling out papers, deciding about the funeral, the casket, all alone, without Joseph by my side. A social worker from the hospital helped me, seeing that I was completely lost. She was the one who suggested I call my mother in Kentucky. Dorothy, my mother, answered on the second ring. When I told her, I heard her crying on the other end of the line, a deep lament that echoed my own unexpressed pain. She promised she would come on the first bus, that she would be with me at the wake. My father, according to her, couldn't come because his back was locked up. Another disappointment, but at that point, I didn't even care. The body would be released early in the evening. I decided to have the wake at home, as was customary. The funeral home would take care of everything. I just needed to go home, prepare the space, and wait. Wait for Joseph, wait for my mother, wait for the body of my little girl, who would never again run through the house. I took one bus, then another. The world seemed unreal around me, people going about their normal lives while mine had just crumbled. How could they smile, talk, worry about such small things when my Annie had gone? I arrived home around 6 in the evening. The door was unlocked, which was strange. I thought perhaps Joseph had arrived and forgotten to lock it. I entered calling his name, but there was no response. The house seemed different. There was a strange, heavy energy. In the bedroom, the bed was unmade, which was unusual. I always made it before leaving, and Joseph was even more meticulous than I was. That's when I saw it. On the pillow, a long red hair. My hair had always been black. I never dyed it. That hair wasn't mine. Before I could process what it meant, I heard a noise coming from the bathroom. The door was closed, but I could hear the shower running, and laughter. 2 voices, one of them unmistakably Joseph's. I don't know where I found the strength to open that door. Maybe from anger, maybe from shock, maybe from the desperate need to understand what was happening on the day my daughter had died. There they were, in the shower stall. Joseph and a red-headed woman I knew all too well. Rose, the secretary from the post office where he worked. She had come to our house a few times for the children's birthday parties. She had given presents to Annie. And now she was there, in my husband's arms, on the day our daughter had passed away. The 2 of them froze when they saw me. The water kept falling, but it was as if time had stopped. Joseph opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Rose tried to cover herself, slipping in the wet shower stall. I remember saying something, but I don't recall what. I remember Joseph's face changing from shock to something that looked almost like irritation, as if I were interrupting something important. I remember leaving the bathroom, the house, and walking aimlessly down the street. I don't know how long I walked. When I came to my senses, I was sitting at a bus stop somewhere, staring at nothing. A lady asked if I was okay. I must have said yes, because she left, but I wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. My daughter had died, my husband was cheating on me, and I still had to find the strength to organize a wake, take care of Michael, somehow move forward. That's when I decided to return to my parents' house in rural Kentucky. Not immediately, I still had Annie's wake and burial ahead, but afterward, I would take Michael, and we would start over there. Away from Joseph, away from the memories, away from the pain of betrayal that now added to the pain of loss. I didn't know, at that moment, that the worst was yet to come, that my parents' house, which I saw as a refuge, would become the scene of the third blow of that terrible day. A blow that would make me question everything, including my will to stay alive. But this, my dear viewers, is such a difficult part of this story that it hurts too much to talk about, so please subscribe to this channel and like this video. I know it's heavy, I know it hurts to hear, but I need to share. Because in silence, we become sick. And after almost half a century keeping this pain inside, I finally found the courage to speak. I returned home like someone going to their own funeral. In my head, I replayed everything that had happened on that cursed day. The rush to the hospital, the grim-faced doctors, my Annie's small, lifeless body, and now the scene I never thought I'd see. Joseph, the man I had promised to love until death parted us, in another woman's arms. The worst wasn't even seeing them together. The worst was understanding that, while I was holding our daughter's hand as she left this world, he was having fun in our bed. The same bed where Annie would crawl in on Sunday mornings, asking us to tell her stories. I entered the house with my heart turned to stone. Joseph was already dressed, sitting in the living room with his head in his hands. The redhead had disappeared, thank God, because I don't know if I would have had the strength not to pull out every strand of that red hair. "Connie, I can explain," he began, raising his head when he saw me. "Explain what, Joseph? That while I was at the hospital with our daughter dying, you were here having fun with the little secretary from the post office?" He turned white as a sheet. "Annie, what happened to her?" "She died." The word came out dry, harsh, as if it had been stuck in my throat for hours. "Died this morning, at 3:20 in the afternoon. And you weren't there. You didn't even answer the phone when I called your workplace." "My God, Connie." He got up, tried to approach. I backed away as if he had some contagious disease. "Don't touch me." My voice came out low, but with a coldness I didn't know I had in me. "Never lay a finger on me again." I saw tears in his eyes. Real tears, because despite everything, he loved Annie. But at that moment, those tears only disgusted me. What right did he have to cry now? "They're going to bring her body here for the wake. My mother is coming from Kentucky. You'll stay here, quiet, behaved, pretending to be a decent father and a respectable husband. For Michael's sake, who already lost his sister today and doesn't deserve to lose his father on the same day. After all this passes, we'll talk." "Connie, it was a terrible mistake. I wasn't thinking straight." "A mistake?" I almost laughed. It was so absurd. A mistake is getting the grocery bill wrong. A mistake is forgetting to pick up Michael from school. What you did on the day your daughter died has no name, Joseph." He started to cry for real, sobbing like a child. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But the image of him with that woman came back, forcefully, overshadowing any compassion that might have arisen. I went to Annie's room. Everything was just as she had left it before going to the hospital. The bed with the Disney princess bedspread she had insisted we buy. The one-eyed teddy bear she called Brave. The colorful drawings on the walls. Almost all of our family holding hands under a smiling sun. That room full of life. And now its owner would never return. I sat on the small bed, hugging Brave against my chest. It was only then that the tears came. A silent crying at first, then sobs that shook my entire body. I cried until my chest hurt, until my eyes burned, until I had no more tears to shed. I don't know how long I stayed there. At some point, I heard the doorbell. It was the funeral home, bringing my little Annie's body. That's when reality hit me with full force. This wasn't a nightmare I would wake up from. It was real. My daughter was no longer alive. My marriage no longer existed. And I needed to find the strength to face the wake, the burial, and everything that would come after. The house soon filled with neighbors, friends, Annie's schoolmates. The small casket was placed in the living room, surrounded by flowers. People took turns offering words of comfort that didn't even reach my ears. Joseph stood in a corner, receiving hugs, pretending to be the father devastated by loss. Michael, my boy, was in shock. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just looked at his sister's casket as if he didn't understand what was happening. My mother arrived in the middle of the night. I'll never forget when she walked through the door, eyes already red from crying on the bus, arms open looking for mine. I clung to her as if she were a lifeline in the middle of a stormy ocean. My daughter, she repeated, hugging me tight. I had never needed my mother as much as I did at that moment. When we managed a minute alone in the kitchen, I told her about Joseph. I couldn't hold back. I needed to share that pain with someone. That bastard, she said, quietly so no one would hear. How could he do this? Today? Today of all days? I don't know, Mom. I don't understand. I can't even look at his face. And what are you going to do, my daughter? I'm going back with you and Michael after all this is over. I can't stay here, in this house, with this man. She squeezed my hand, understanding without needing more words. The rest of the night was a blur of faces, voices, restrained crying. The pain and exhaustion left me numb, as if I were watching everything from outside my own body. Occasionally, I felt Joseph's gaze upon me, a mixture of guilt and pleading that I made a point of ignoring. In the early morning, when most people had already left, I stayed alone beside my little girl's casket. Michael had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying silently. Joseph was smoking on the porch, talking quietly with a colleague from the post office. My mother was in the kitchen, preparing coffee for the few who remained at the wake. That's when I noticed Joseph's cell phone on the table. In those days, cell phones were for the wealthy, but he had gotten one at work for emergencies. The device vibrated, indicating a message. Without thinking twice, I picked it up and opened it. It was her, Rose. I'm sorry about what happened today. I know it wasn't the right time. Call me when you can. I'm worried about you. The audacity, the shamelessness. Not a word about Annie, about the tragedy that had occurred. Just concern for her lover, for the interrupted moment. Something broke inside me. It wasn't just the pain of loss or the humiliation of betrayal. It was a primal, visceral anger that rose in my throat like acid. On impulse, I left the living room, crossed the porch where Joseph was talking, and walked to the street. Connie, where are you going? I heard him call, confused. I didn't even respond. I kept walking, with no clear direction. It was almost 4 a.m. The streets were deserted, dangerous for a woman alone, but I didn't care. Nothing could be worse than what I was already experiencing. I ended up at the neighborhood playground. I sat on a bench, looking at the swing where Annie loved to play, always asking, "Higher, Mom, higher." At that moment, I just wanted to disappear, to vanish from this world that had become unbearably cruel in less than 24 hours. That's when I saw the cell phone still in my hand. Without thinking much, I dialed Rose's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy. "Joe, is that you?" "No, Rose, it's Constance." Silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her heart racing. "Constance, my daughter died today, Rose." My voice came out strangely calm, almost sweet, which made it all the more terrifying. "My 8-year-old girl died while you two were having sex in my bed." My God, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Now you know. And you know what else? You two deserve each other. You're cut from the same cloth, so you can have him. I just ask one thing. When you lie down with him in our bed, remember that at the same time you were enjoying yourselves, I was watching my daughter stop breathing forever. I hung up before she could respond, and I started to laugh, a hysterical, uncontrolled laugh that soon turned into crying again. I stayed there, alternately laughing and crying, like a crazy woman, until I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my mother. She had followed me, worried. "Let's go home, daughter. You need to rest a little." "What home, Mom? That's not my home anymore." "Then let's go to neighbor Dora's house. She said we can stay there. You lie down for a bit, rest before the burial." Burial. The word fell on me like a stone. In a few hours, they would put my Annie in the ground. I would never see that smile again, never hear that laugh, never feel her tight hug around my neck. I returned with my mother, but not to the house. We went to Dora's house, who welcomed me with open arms, without questions. I lay down in the guest bed, more at my mother's insistence than by my own will. I wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. However, exhaustion overcame me. I slept a heavy, dreamless sleep, the kind that seems more like passing out than rest. When I woke up, it was already past 9 in the morning. The burial was scheduled for 10. I returned home only to change clothes. Joseph was there, sitting in the kitchen with an untouched cup of coffee in front of him. When he saw me, he jumped up. "Connie, we need to talk." "Not now, Joseph. Not today. Please, just listen to me. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I love you and Michael. We can overcome this together, as a family." I looked at him as if I were seeing a stranger. How could he talk about family on the day we were burying our daughter? How could he think there was anything to overcome? "Family?" I repeated, incredulous. "What family, Joseph? Our family ended yesterday, twice. First when Annie left us, then when I found you with that woman." "It was a terrible mistake, I know, but enough." I cut him off with a gesture. "Now we're going to get ready and bury our daughter with dignity. Afterward, you're going to leave this house." "Leave? To go where?" "Wherever you want. To hell, preferably, or to your mistress's house. I don't care. You just won't stay here anymore." He seemed to deflate before my eyes. All the arrogance, all the desperation from moments ago gave way to a miserable acceptance. At that instant, I think he understood that he had lost everything. His daughter by the hand of fate, his wife and son by the work of his own stupidity. The burial was as painful as I had imagined. The cemetery was full. It seemed like half the neighborhood had come to say goodbye to Annie. The children from her school came in uniform, each with a white flower. Her teacher had organized a small tribute where each little friend said one quality about my girl: kind, cheerful, friendly, brave. Each word was like a knife in my maternal heart. When they began to lower the casket, I felt my legs weaken. If it weren't for my mother on one side and neighbor Dora on the other, I think I would have fallen right there. Michael grabbed my waist, hiding his face against my body, as if he didn't want to see his sister disappear into the dark earth. Joseph cried the whole time, in such a genuine way that, for a moment, I felt a speck of pity. He was a father after all. As bad as he was as a husband, he had never been a bad father. He loved the children, played with them, told stories before bedtime. But on that day, that paternal love meant nothing to me. The betrayal had poisoned everything. After the burial, we returned home. Most people left. Only my mother, Dora, and some closer neighbors remained, who began to organize the kitchen, wash the cups used during the wake, store the food that people had brought. Joseph disappeared. I don't know where he went, and honestly, I didn't care. All I wanted was to take a shower, grab some clothes for myself and Michael, and go to my mother's house in Campbellsville, Kentucky. To start over, away from that pain, that betrayal, those memories. I didn't know at that moment that Joseph had gone after my father, that the two were talking, plotting something that would change the course of this story forever. I didn't know that the third blow of that cursed day was yet to come, more cruel and devastating than I could have imagined. But this, my dear friends, is the most difficult part of this story. The part that for almost half a century I kept locked deep in my soul, without the courage to tell anyone. The part that still wakes me up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, even after so much time. It's also the part that made me understand that sometimes the person who should protect you is precisely the one you most need to defend yourself against. And that revenge, as sweet as it may seem, doesn't always bring the relief we expect. When all the visitors had left, I was alone with Michael, who had fallen asleep exhausted on the couch, and my mother, who was silently tidying up the kitchen. The house had that heavy silence that only exists after death has passed through a place. A silence that suffocates, that makes every little noise, a cup hitting a saucer, a bird singing outside, seem like an affront. "I'm going to take a shower, Mom," I said, dragging myself toward the bathroom. "Then I'll pack our things. I want to catch tomorrow morning's bus to Campbellsville." My mother nodded, without even the strength to speak. She was also destroyed. Annie was her only granddaughter, the princess she showered with treats whenever she visited. The shower was long and hot. I let the water run down my body as if it could wash away not just the dirt, but the pain, the anger, everything bad that had accumulated in less than 48 hours. Of course it didn't work. No shower in the world would be able to clean that stain on the soul. I came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel and went to the bedroom to get clean clothes. I opened the wardrobe, and the first thing I saw was one of Joseph's shirts. Without thinking, I grabbed it and threw it out the window. Then a pair of pants, another shirt, all his clothes that I could grab. I was in the middle of this purification ritual when I heard the front door open. I imagined it was Joseph returning. Quickly, I put on a nightgown and a robe over it, and went to the living room to tell him I wanted him out of that house that very night. But it wasn't my husband. It was my father. Stanley Anderson, or Stan as everyone called him, was standing in the living room, hands in the pockets of his worn pants, his old straw hat held between his fingers. A man of about 65, thin and stooped from a lifetime of hard work on the farm, but still with that hard look that had frightened me since childhood. "Dad? What are you doing here? I thought you couldn't come to the funeral because of your back," I said, confused by his unexpected appearance. "Got better," he replied, dry as always. He was never a man of many words. "Your mother?" "In the kitchen." He nodded and remained standing there, looking at me in a strange way that made me uncomfortable. Only then did I realize what I had initially ignored. I was just in a nightgown and robe, my wet hair loose over my shoulders. I felt exposed, vulnerable. "I'll get properly dressed and be right back," I murmured, turning my back and heading toward the bedroom. Passing by the kitchen, I saw my mother sitting at the table, staring at nothing with a cup of cold coffee in front of her. She didn't seem to have noticed her husband's arrival. "Mom, Dad's here," I warned, finding the whole situation strange. She raised her head, startled. "Your father? Here?" Her tone alarmed me even more. Something was wrong, something I couldn't identify. "Yes, he's in the living room. Said his back got better." My mother's face turned pale in a way I had never seen before. She jumped up, spilling coffee on the table. "Constance, don't be alone with him. Wait for me." Before I could ask what that meant, I heard my father's voice calling from the hallway. "Dorothy, you there? Come here." "Coming, Stan," my mother responded, her voice trembling. Then turning to me, she whispered, "Go to your room. Lock yourself in there. Don't come out until I call you." Nothing made sense. Why was my mother, always so submissive to my father, now practically giving me orders? And why shouldn't I be alone with my own father? Confused, but obedient as I always had been, I headed to the bedroom. I didn't actually lock myself in as she asked. It seemed too extreme, even on that day of madness. I quickly dressed in simple pants and a blouse. I was finishing drying my hair with the towel when the door opened without warning. It was my father again. My mother wasn't with him. "Where's Mom?" I asked, immediately uncomfortable. "Sent her to buy me cigarettes at the store. Wanted to talk to you alone." My stomach sank. There was something sinister in his voice, in the restless hands that kept turning the hat, in the gaze that now wandered over my body without any shame. "Talk about what, Dad?" "Today is not a good day. I just buried my daughter. That's exactly what I want to talk about." He closed the door behind him. The click of the doorknob sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Your Joseph told me what happened, that you caught him with another woman. So that was it." Joseph had sought out my father, probably to ask him to intervene on his behalf, to convince his stubborn daughter to give her husband another chance. Typical. "There's nothing to talk about, Dad. It's over." I'm going back with Michael to Campbellsville tomorrow. He took a step in my direction. Instinctively, I backed away. No, you're not. You're going to stay here with your husband. A separated woman gives people something to talk about, becomes a reason for gossip. And I didn't raise a daughter to be spoken ill of. With all due respect, Dad, that decision is mine. I'm an adult. I have my own life. That's when he smiled. A smile I had never seen before, one that didn't match that always closed, always serious face. A smile that made my blood freeze in my veins. Joseph told me you've been very rebellious, that you don't respect him as a husband anymore, that you've been refusing your wifely duties. I felt my face burn. What exactly had Joseph told my father? What marital intimacies had he exposed to this man who barely knew him, who only saw him during our rare visits to Campbellsville? That's none of your business. It's between him and me. Another step in my direction, another retreat from me until I felt the cold wall against my back. There was nowhere else to go. It is my business. My daughter has to honor the family name, has to be a proper woman, not these modern nonsense ways of today. Dad, please get out of my room. I don't have the mindset for this conversation right now. He dropped the hat on the bed. His now free hands seemed even more threatening. Your Joseph asked me a favor, asked me to talk to you, make you understand a woman's place. But words don't work with you, they never have. You've always been too stubborn. What happened next still torments me in nightmares. It still makes me wake up screaming in the middle of the night, even after so many decades. It still makes me feel dirty, used, less than human. My own father, the man who should protect me from the world, lunged at me with a violence I never imagined existed inside him. His large hands, calloused from work on the farm, grabbed my arms with enough force to leave bruises that lasted for weeks. His mouth, with a whiskey breath I hadn't noticed before, pressed against mine as I tried to scream, call for help, understand what was happening. I'm going to teach you to be a proper woman, he growled, between forced kisses and hands that tore at my newly donned clothes. I'm going to show you how to obey a man. I fought. I swear to God I fought with all the strength I had. I scratched, bit, kicked, but he was stronger, much stronger. And I was already weak, destroyed by the loss of my daughter, by my husband's betrayal, by everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. When he threw me on the bed, in a brutal movement that almost dislocated my shoulder, I was certain I would die there. That after everything, this would be my end. Violated by my own father, on the same bed where my husband had betrayed me hours before, in the same house where my daughter would never enter again. That's when I heard a noise, something heavy falling, breaking. The pressure of his body on mine suddenly decreased. I opened my eyes, which I hadn't realized were tightly closed, and saw my mother standing beside the bed. In her hands, the remains of a ceramic lamp that used to sit on the nightstand. My father was lying on his side on the bed, holding his head, blood flowing between his fingers. "Run, daughter," my mother said, in a voice that didn't seem to be hers. A firm, decisive voice that I had never heard from that woman who was always so submissive. "Take Michael and go to Dora's house, now." I don't know how I managed to get up, how I managed to adjust my torn clothes enough to cover my body. My legs were shaking so much I thought I would fall with each step. But the survival instinct is something powerful. I ran to the living room, where Michael was still sleeping on the couch, oblivious to everything that had happened. I picked him up in my arms, even though he was already too big for that, and went out the door without looking back, without shoes, without a purse, with nothing but my son in my arms and terror running through my veins. Dora, the neighbor who had been so helpful in the last few hours, opened the door at the first ring of the doorbell. One look at my condition, torn clothes, eyes wide with terror, the unconscious son in my arms, was enough. She pulled me inside, locked the door, and took me to the back bedroom without asking questions. "Stay here. I'll make some tea for you." I laid Michael on the bed, covering him with a clean sheet that smelled of fabric softener. He didn't even stir, too exhausted from the terrible day we had been through. I sat beside him, trembling uncontrollably, trying to process what had happened, what had almost happened. Dora returned with the promised tea and something more, a clean dress folded over her arm. "Take a shower, change clothes. Afterward, if you want to talk, I'm here. If you don't want to, I'm here too. The kindness of that woman, who wasn't even a relative, just a neighbor with whom I exchanged recipes from time to time, almost made me collapse again. But I had no more tears. I was dry inside, hollow, as if they had ripped out everything that made me human. I took another shower, this time at Dora's house. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, as if I could wash away his touch, his smell. I put on the borrowed dress, too big for me but comfortable in its cotton simplicity. When I returned to the bedroom, Michael was still sleeping. I lay down beside him, pulling him against my chest as I did when he was little and had nightmares. But the one having the nightmare now was me, and there was no mother's lap that could comfort me. I don't know how much time passed. I lost all sense of time, space, everything. At some point I heard knocking on the door. Dora's voice muffled. "Constance, your mother is here." My mother. My God, my mother had stayed there with him. What could have happened? "She can come in," I answered, my voice hoarse from crying so much. The door opened, and there she was. Dorothy, my mother, her face marked by a lifetime of hard work and submission. But there was something different in her eyes now, a sparkle, a determination I had never seen before. She entered, closed the door behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, we just looked at each other, mother and daughter, united by a terrible secret that could never be shared with the world. "He won't hurt you anymore," she finally said, her voice low so as not to wake Michael. "Never again." I didn't ask what she meant by that. I didn't want to know. Some things are better left unsaid, not fully understood. "How did you know?" I asked instead. "How did you know that he was going to—" "Because he's done it before," she answered, her eyes fixed on her own hands, knotted and prematurely aged by hard work. "Not to me, to others." A shiver ran down my spine. "Others? How many? Who?" "When you were little, we had a neighbor, Mary Jo. Remember her?" I nodded. "A young, pretty woman who lived alone and used to give me candy when she met me on the street. One day, she turned up dead. They said it was suicide, that she hanged herself, but I saw the bruises on her body when I helped prepare her for the wake. They weren't made by any rope." The horror of that revelation left me speechless. My father, a murderer? It was too much to process, to accept. "He's not a good man, Constance, never was. I only stayed with him all these years because I was afraid of what he might do to me, to you. But now," she stopped, as if she had said too much. Her eyes suddenly seemed distant, almost glazed over. "And Joseph?" I asked, changing the subject, unable to hear more about my father and his crimes. "Where is he?" A shadow passed over my mother's face. "He left." "Left? What do you mean?" After I hit your father with the lamp, he appeared at the bedroom door, saw everything. The situation, the blood, you running away. He was in shock, said he was going to call the police. I told him not to, that if he called the police, I would tell them it was all his idea, that he had conspired with your father to teach you a lesson because you had discovered his affair. "And was it?" I asked, my breath suspended. Was it his idea? My mother hesitated, as if weighing how much she should tell me. "Not exactly. Your father already had this disease inside him. Joseph just provided the opportunity. He told your father you were impossible, that you needed to be tamed. Your father interpreted it in his own way, with the evil that already existed in him." I closed my eyes, trying to digest all of that. Joseph hadn't exactly planned what happened, but he had planted the seed. He had opened the door for the wolf to enter. "Where did he go?" "I don't know, daughter. He packed a suitcase, put in some clothes, and said he couldn't look you in the face anymore after what he had done, that he preferred to disappear. One less problem, at least. I wouldn't have to confront or explain to Michael why his father had gone away. He had taken care of that himself, running away like the coward he was. "And my father?" I asked, although I wasn't sure if I wanted to know the answer. My mother was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was just a whisper, but it carried the weight of an irreversible decision. "Your father won't hurt anyone anymore, Constance. Never again." That night, lying in bed at Dora's house, With Michael sleeping beside me and my mother dozing in a chair in the corner of the room, I understood that my life had changed forever. Not just because of the loss of my Annie, which would leave an eternal hole in my heart. Not just because of Joseph's betrayal, which had destroyed any faith I might have had in men, but mainly because of the horror my own father had tried to inflict on me, and because of my mother's reaction, a woman I had always judged weak, submissive, unable to defend herself, but who had found the strength to protect her daughter in a way I could never have imagined. That night, between extreme exhaustion and recent trauma, I had a dream. A vivid, intense dream that seemed more real than reality itself. In it, I saw my mother in the kitchen of our house, stirring something in a large pot, the same one she used to make soap. In the dream, she hummed softly while stirring the steaming contents. And in the back of the kitchen, tossed in a corner like a sack of potatoes, was my father's body, motionless, his open eyes staring at nothing. I woke up startled, in a cold sweat, with the terrible certainty that it hadn't been just a dream. But I never asked. Some truths are too heavy to carry, and I was already overloaded with my own pain. The next morning, we took the first bus to Campbellsville, Kentucky. Me, Michael, and my mother. We left behind the house, the furniture, the memories. We left behind an entire life that had become unbearable in just 48 hours. Nobody asked about my father. Not the neighbors, not the relatives in Campbellsville when we arrived there. It was as if everyone instinctively understood that it was better not to bring up the subject, as if a silent agreement had been made. Don't ask, don't tell, move on. And that's what we did. We moved forward, carrying our invisible scars, our terrible secrets, our shared pain. 3 generations of women, marked by the violence of men who should have protected us, loved us, respected us. But this story isn't over yet, my dear viewers. Because fate, that unpredictable novelist, still had some twists in store for us. Twists that involved unexpected reunions, shocking revelations, and yes, a revenge that took years to plan, but that, when it came, was as sweet as the purest honey. The first months in Campbellsville were like walking through a minefield. Every step hurt, every memory exploded inside me. Michael, poor thing, suffered silently, not really understanding why we had left everything behind. The house, his friends, the school he liked so much. He only knew that his little sister had gone to heaven and his father had traveled for work. Merciful lies we told to protect a 10-year-old child from truths too heavy to bear. We settled in my mother's simple house. 2 small bedrooms, combined living room and kitchen, a tiny bathroom in the back. The yard was the best part. Large, with apple, pear, and cherry trees, where Michael could play when he wasn't at his new school. I woke up every day with that feeling of weight on my chest. You know when you dream you're falling into an endless abyss, and you wake up startled before hitting the ground. It was like that, except I never really woke up. I lived in a constant nightmare, wishing the earth would swallow me so I could be close to my Annie. My mother soon realized I was sinking. I may have lost my daughter, my husband, and my dignity, but I still had a son who needed me. Michael depended on his mother to survive, to grow, to become a different man from those who had hurt us. Get out of that bed, Constance, my mother would tell me every morning, pulling back the covers with a firmness I had never seen in her before. The sun has risen, and you have a son to raise. It was as if what happened had transformed my mother. That submissive, quiet woman, who accepted everything with her head down, had vanished. In her place emerged a warrior with wrinkles on her face and strength in her calloused hands. A woman who, after decades of enduring the worst kind of husband, had finally freed herself. How? I never asked directly. Some answers are too dangerous to have. A month after our arrival, I started looking for a job. My mother's meager pension barely covered the 3 of us, and I needed to occupy my mind with something besides pain. My experience as a nursing assistant helped me. I got a position at a small clinic in the outskirts of town. Work was my salvation. Caring for others, cleaning others' wounds, giving injections, dressing wounds. These were concrete problems I could solve, unlike the hole in my chest that nothing could close. I worked 6 days a week, often doing overtime just so I wouldn't have to go home and face the silence of the night. Michael adapted gradually. Children have this incredible capacity to start over. He made friends at his new school, began playing baseball in a dirt field near the house, started smiling again occasionally. The nightmares diminished over time. He stopped asking about his father after the first 6 months without news. It was during this time that Joseph appeared. Not in person. Thank God he didn't have that courage. He sent a letter, postmarked from Chicago. In it, he asked forgiveness for what he had done. Said he was working at a bank, that he had started a new life. He asked about Michael, if he was well, if he had adapted. He didn't ask about me even once. At the end, he asked to send news through a post office box. I tore the letter into 1,000 pieces and flushed it down the toilet. End of story. Or so I thought. A year after our move, we received an unexpected visit. It was a Sunday morning. My mother and I were preparing lunch while Michael played in the yard. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, I came face to face with her. Rose, the redhead from the post office, my husband's mistress. Before you imagine it, no, I didn't attack her. I didn't pull out her red hair one by one as I had dreamed so many times. I was paralyzed at the door, unable to believe what my eyes were seeing. She was different. Thinner, her hair shorter, deep circles under her eyes marking the face I once thought was pretty. It seemed like she had aged 10 years in just one. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice so low I almost didn't hear it. "I really need to talk to you." My first instinct was to slam the door in her face, but something stopped me. Maybe curiosity, maybe the genuinely frightened expression on her face. 5 minutes, I replied, gesturing for her to enter. "My son is at home and I don't want him to see you." I took Rose to the back porch, as far as possible from the yard where Michael was playing. My mother, who had seen everything from the kitchen, made a motion to come after us, but I signaled for her to stay where she was. It was a conversation I needed to have alone. "Say quickly what you want," I demanded as soon as we sat down. "I don't have all day." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling so much that she had to intertwine her fingers to control them. "I came to warn you, Constance. Joseph, he's not who you think he is." I almost laughed. "That I already discovered in the worst possible way when I found you two in my bathroom." "No, you don't understand." She was constantly looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "He's dangerous. Very dangerous." That's when I noticed what I had ignored at first. A yellowish bruise on her neck, partially covered by the high collar of her dress. Without thinking, I extended my hand and pulled down the fabric, revealing a purple mark in the shape of fingers. "Did he do this to you?" I asked, suddenly alert. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "And much more. Constance, he only used me to hurt you. To hurt us. I was stupid. I thought he loved me, that he would leave you to be with me. But he never wanted that. He only wanted..." "Wanted what?" I questioned when she hesitated. "To destroy you. He hated you. He said you suffocated him, that you were too controlling, that you had ruined his life by getting pregnant so young. And he especially hated Annie, because she was sick and was a burden, required money for medicines." A chill ran down my spine. That didn't make sense. Joseph had always seemed to love the children, especially Annie, whom he spoiled like a princess. "You're lying," I accused. "He adored Annie. In front of you, yes, to keep up appearances. But when we were alone," she swallowed hard, "he said horrible things. That it would be better if she died soon, that then you could have a normal life, without medical expenses, without worries." My world spun. I had to hold on to the chair not to fall. Could it be possible? Joseph, the dedicated father, wishing for his own daughter's death? It was too monstrous to believe. And yet, something in that revelation made a terrible kind of sense. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. "Why did you come here?" "Because he's back." Her voice trembled as much as her hands. "He's in Memphis again, asking about you, about Michael. He found out where you are, and he said he's going to recover what belongs to him." I froze. The idea of Joseph showing up at our door, wanting to take Michael, or worse, do something against us. How did he know where we were? He still has contacts at the post office. He tracked the transfer of your work ID, your new address. Constance, you need to be careful. He's not the man you thought you knew. When he drinks, he transforms, becomes a monster. I remembered my father. Another monster disguised as an ordinary man. Another invisible threat until it was too late. And you? I asked, looking again at the marks on her neck. Why don't you run away? I'm trying. I came here in secret, took the last money I had saved. I'm going to Los Angeles. I have a cousin there. I just came to warn you first because she hesitated, biting her lower lip. Because I feel guilty. For everything. For Annie. For that day. For what happened afterward. I know you'll never forgive me, and I'm not asking for that. I just didn't want to have another death on my conscience. The casual mention of death alerted me. There was more to this story, something she wasn't telling me. What death? What are you talking about? Rose turned pale, realizing she had said too much. She got up abruptly, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. I need to go. I've warned you. Be careful, Constance, very careful. She was already at the door when I caught up with her, grabbing her arm firmly. You're not leaving like this. Tell me everything now. Our eyes met, mine hard as stone, hers brimming with terror. He said he took care of your father, that it was he who helped your mother solve the problem. That if you don't return to him, he'll tell everything to the police. My blood froze in my veins. Joseph knew. He knew what had happened that night with my father. And he was using it as a threat. I released her arm, too stunned to insist. Rose took the opportunity to leave quickly, practically running down the sidewalk. I stood at the door, trying to process all of that. When I returned inside, my mother was in the living room, hands crossed in her lap, her face tense. What did she want? She asked, her voice controlled, but her eyes shining with concern. Joseph, I answered simply. He's back, and he knows about Dad. I didn't need to explain further. My mother understood immediately. Her face, normally so expressive, closed into an impassive mask that I had learned to fear. Then we'll have to take care of him too, she said, with a calmness that chilled me to the soul. At that moment, looking at that woman in her 60s, gray hair and hands marked by decades of hard work, I understood a fundamental truth. There is no more dangerous force in the world than a mother protecting her offspring, and I was my mother's daughter, made of the same clay, the same blood, the same fierce determination I now saw in those eyes. No, Mom, I replied, sitting beside her. This time we'll do it differently. This time we'll make sure he never hurts anyone again, but without getting our hands dirty in the process. That's how our plan was born. A plan that would take years to execute, that would require patience, intelligence, and a kind of calculated coldness that I didn't even know I possessed. A plan that would transform into the sweetest and at the same time most terrible revenge anyone could imagine. In the months that followed, we continued our lives normally. Me working at the clinic, Michael studying, my mother taking care of the house. On the outside, we were just an ordinary family trying to rebuild our lives after a tragedy. On the inside, we were a fortress being erected, stone by stone, against the threat that loomed over us. I started studying at night, taking a technical course in administration. My mother learned to sew better, to make small repairs to clothes for the neighborhood. Michael, now entering adolescence, began to show a talent for math that we didn't even know he had. Every penny we earned beyond what was necessary for survival, we saved. Not in a bank. We didn't trust institutions where Joseph might have contacts. We kept it at home, in a hiding place only we knew about. At the same time, we kept our ears open for any news about Joseph. Through former neighbors from Memphis, we learned that he had returned to the city, but no longer lived in our old neighborhood. He had gotten a job at a larger bank, was moving up in his career. Apparently, he had a new girlfriend, a woman much younger than him. 3 years passed like this. Michael was now 13, growing quickly, turning into a young man who looked more and more like his father. Physically only, thank God. In personality, he was the opposite. Gentle, attentive, studious. A boy who filled me with pride. That's when I received a call at the clinic. It was a Thursday. I remember it as if it were today. The receptionist called me saying it was urgent, a family matter. Constance? It's August, remember me? Your second cousin, Aunt Josephine's son. Of course I remembered. August was about 10 years older than me, had been like an older brother in childhood before moving to New York when I was still a teenager. August, what a surprise. Everything okay with you? Yes, everything's fine. His voice seemed tense, hurried. Look, I'm calling because something strange happened. A man contacted me saying he was your husband. Joseph Carter, that's his name, right? My blood froze. Ex-husband, I corrected automatically. What did he want from you? He was asking about you all. About you, Michael, your mother, where you were living exactly, if you had moved recently, if I had visited you. And what did you tell him? Nothing, of course, Constance. I found it very strange. I said I hadn't been in contact with you for years, which is true. But I was worried, so I'm calling. Is something wrong happening? I hesitated. How much should I tell? August had always been reliable, but involving him in our problems could be dangerous for him. Joseph and I separated a few years ago, I replied vaguely. It wasn't amicable. He shouldn't be looking for us. I understand. Look, if he contacts me again, I'll brush him off. But I thought you should know. He seemed determined. After hanging up, I kept thinking. Joseph was closing in, tightening the circle. It was just a matter of time before he found us. I told my mother as soon as I got home. Her aged face became serious, her lips pressed into a thin line. It's time, she said simply. I knew what that meant. Our plan, carefully elaborated over 3 years, needed to be put into action. We couldn't wait any longer. The next day, I quit my job at the clinic. I explained that I needed to take care of my mother, who was having health issues. A half-truth. She really was aging, the pains in her joints getting worse with each winter. We sold the little we had accumulated in Campbellsville. My mother's sewing machine, some better furniture, even the chickens in the yard. We added this money to our savings from 3 years of hard work. It was time to disappear, not just from Joseph, but from our entire past. A new life, in a place where no one knew us, where we could finally breathe without fear. We chose rural Virginia, a small town called Lovingston, near Charlottesville, but not so touristy. The kind of place where strangers were noticed, but received with Southern hospitality. Where too many questions weren't well received. Where a man looking for a family would be easily identified, giving us time to escape again if necessary. Before leaving, however, we had one last thing to do. The most important part of our plan, the one that would ensure Joseph would never look for us again. The revenge we had meticulously planned for 1,000 days and 1,000 nights. But that, my dear viewers, is the last chapter of this story. A chapter so surprising that, even after so many years, it still makes me tremble to remember. A revenge so perfect, so complete, that perhaps it's hard to believe that a simple woman like me, a nursing assistant from a small town, was capable of orchestrating. What I can say is that never underestimate the power of a wounded mother, of a betrayed woman, of a human being who has hit rock bottom and discovered, in the depths of pain, a strength she didn't know she possessed. Before telling the last chapter of this story, I want to clarify that what we did wasn't out of malice. It was for survival. When a wild animal corners you, you have no choice but to fight with the weapons you have. And we, 3 women alone in a world that favors men like Joseph, had only our intelligence and the strength of our desperation. Our move to Lovingston was planned in the utmost secrecy. We didn't even tell our closest relatives where we were going. Only Michael knew, of course, but he was already 13 years old and understood the gravity of the situation. That boy had to grow up too fast, seeing his sister die, his father disappear, and now having to flee as if we were criminals. But before completely vanishing, we executed the final part of our plan. The day before our departure, I sent a letter to Joseph. Not directly. It would have been foolish to reveal our address. I sent it through a nurse friend who was visiting her daughter in Memphis. She mailed the letter from there with a fake return address. In the letter, I said I was willing to talk, to resolve things in a civilized manner, that I had discovered things about my father's death that the police would certainly be interested in. but that I preferred an amicable agreement. I set up a meeting in a public place, the central square of Louisville, Kentucky, 2 hours from Campbellsville. It was a calculated risk. I knew Joseph would come, both because of the veiled threat and the opportunity to have me back. Men like him can't stand being left, don't accept losing what they consider their property. Meanwhile, in a parallel strategy, my mother sent another letter. This one was addressed to the Memphis Police Department, specifically to Detective Jerome, a man known for his incorruptibility. In it, my mother confessed everything about my father's death. How he had tried to violate me on the day of my daughter's burial. How she had hit him with a lamp to defend me. How Joseph had appeared afterward and, instead of calling the police, helped dispose of the body. "I will be dead when you read this," the letter said, in a shaky handwriting that wasn't pretense. Her hands really did shake a lot in those days. "But I can't depart taking this secret with me. My daughter Constance knew nothing about it. She just ran away scared. The one who planned everything was Joseph, who used the situation to manipulate me for years, threatening to tell the police if I didn't do what he wanted. The third part of the plan involved a visit I made to Rose before she left for Los Angeles. It wasn't easy to swallow my pride and seek out my husband's mistress, but I needed her for everything to work. "I need you to do something for me and for Michael," I asked, without beating around the bush. "I know you're leaving, but before that, I want you to file a police report against Joseph. For assault, for the threats, for everything he did to you." She hesitated, fear evident in her eyes. "He'll find me. He'll take revenge." "No, he won't, because he'll be too busy defending himself against much worse accusations than hitting a woman." On the morning of the meeting scheduled in the square, I wasn't in Louisville, of course. I was on a bus with Michael and my mother, heading for rural Virginia, for our new life. But Joseph didn't know that. He was there, in the square, waiting for me. And who showed up? The police. The plan was perfect in its simplicity. Joseph, wanted for suspected involvement in a homicide, my father, waiting at a specific location and time that we ourselves had provided to the police through an anonymous tip. In his house in Memphis, a search would reveal the threatening letters he had sent me in recent months, written by myself, imitating his handwriting, using what I remembered from his old love letters, and a diary where he supposedly confessed to knowing about Annie's death before it happened. "Everything went according to plan," stated the fake diary. "The doctor has been my friend since school. I just had to pay extra for him to mess up the anesthesia dosage. Now I just need to get rid of Constance too. That woman and that sick pest ruined my life for too long. Cruel? Yes. But no crueler than wishing death upon his own daughter. No crueler than betraying me on the day our little girl died. No crueler than inciting my father to attack me, and then using that as a threat. We only found out the result months later, through old newspapers that we asked an acquaintance to bring when he traveled to that region. Joseph had been arrested, accused of being an accomplice in a homicide and of conspiring to kill his own daughter. The evidence was circumstantial, but gained weight with Rose's testimony about the abuse and the horrible things he said about Annie. The doctor who had cared for my daughter, of course, vehemently denied any involvement. And indeed, he had none. The diary was pure invention. But the doubt was planted, and his career was never the same. Joseph got 15 years in prison, not for what he had actually done, but for what they believed he had done. A crooked, imperfect justice, but the only one possible under those circumstances. Our new life in Virginia started from scratch. We rented a simple little house. I got a job as a nursing assistant at the local hospital. My mother went back to sewing, and Michael entered school. We adopted new names. I became April, my mother Betty, and Michael became Matthew. Common names that wouldn't draw attention. The first years were difficult. Sleepless nights, always alert to any noise, to the slightest sign of someone asking about us. Michael had problems at school, missed his old friends, had difficulty adapting. My mother, already elderly, suffered with the different climate, colder than Kentucky. But we survived. More than that, gradually, we rebuilt our lives. Michael, now Matthew, graduated from high school with excellent grades. He got a scholarship to a university in Richmond, the first person in the family to have higher education. He chose law. "I want to help people like us, Mom," he told me the day he received the acceptance letter. People the system ignores, who need someone on their side. My mother passed away in 1992, peacefully, in her sleep. She was 72 years old, and in recent times finally seemed at peace. At the wake, looking at that wrinkled face, now serene in death, I thought about everything she had lived through. A life of submission to a violent man, of sacrifices for me and her grandchildren, of hard work without recognition. And yet, in the end, she found the courage to do what needed to be done, to protect us, even if it meant staining her own soul. I cried at her funeral not just from sadness, but from gratitude, for everything she taught me, for the example she was, not of the submissive woman of the early years, but of the warrior who awoke when necessity knocked at the door. I stayed in Livingston even after Michael moved away for college. I liked the quiet life, the surrounding mountains, the clean air. Gradually, I relaxed. The paranoia decreased. I began to put down real roots. I made friendships, got involved in the community, became Miss April, whom everyone knew and respected. No one needed to know about the horrors of my past. In 1995, almost 15 years after that triple tragedy, I received a letter. My heart froze when I saw the sender. Maximum security prison, Memphis. It could only be him. I thought about burning it without opening it. Why stir up this hornet's nest now, when I had finally found some peace? But curiosity was stronger. Constance, the letter began, in that handwriting I would recognize anywhere. I know you'll probably throw this letter away without reading it. I don't blame you. What I did was unforgivable. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness, which I know I don't deserve, but to tell you that I'm dying. Lung cancer, terminal stage. The doctors say I have a few months. It continued with a complete confession. He admitted to the affair, the hatred he felt for me for being stronger than him, the sick jealousy of the relationship I had with Annie. He confessed that he had indeed thought several times that it would be easier if she died, but swore he had never conspired with any doctor to make that happen. He also admitted to having incited my father against me, counting on his violent nature, even without knowing exactly what would happen. I will die soon, and I deserve the hell that awaits me, he wrote at the end. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I never stopped loving Michael. If one day you read this and he is already an adult, tell him that his father, as bad as he was as a man, truly loved him. I didn't respond. I had nothing to say. I kept the letter in an old box along with the few photos I had managed to bring of Annie and moved on. I never knew if he really died at that time, if the cancer was true or just another manipulation. And honestly, I didn't care. Michael graduated in law with honors. He got a job at a law firm in Richmond, specializing in human rights. Later, he opened his own firm. He married a beautiful teacher named Helen and gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren. On my 60th birthday, in 2006, he gave me a present that left me speechless. A small but comfortable house in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Why here? I asked, confused. I had never spoken of my desire to return to the South, to feel again that strong sun, that warmth that seemed to enter the soul. Because it's far enough from Memphis and Campbellsville for you to feel safe, but close enough to feel at home, he answered, showing that he knew me better than I knew myself. I moved to Jonesboro that same year. At first, I kept the name April as a precaution. But gradually, when it became clear that no one from the past would come to haunt me, I went back to being Constance. Not the same Constance, of course. That woman had died along with Annie, with my father's last breath of dignity, with my husband's betrayal. The new Constance was stronger, wiser, more cautious with people, but also more compassionate with those who suffer. I started quilting to pass the time and supplement my retirement. I discovered I had a talent for it. The hands that had learned to heal wounds in health clinics now created beauty with needle and thread. My quilts, blankets, and shawls soon became famous at the Sunday market. People came from far away to buy Miss Connie's quilts. That's the woman you see today, a 79-year-old woman, white hair tied in a loose bun, wrinkled hands that don't stop working even as I'm telling this story. A proud grandmother of a successful lawyer and 2 college grandchildren. A widow, for that's how I present myself, although technically I'm divorced, respected in the community, known for her generosity and for always having fresh coffee for visitors. No one here in Jonesboro imagines what this old lady has lived through. The layers of tragedy, betrayal, and pain that accumulated in just a few days. The strength I had to find to survive, to protect my son, to rebuild a life from the ruins. Sometimes I wonder if I did right. If our elaborate revenge against Joseph was just. If the half-truth about my father's death was the correct choice. I don't have simple answers. I only know that we did what needed to be done at the time, with the emotional and practical resources we had available. Did I forgive Joseph? I don't know. Maybe. Time has this strange ability to dilute even the most intense hatreds, to transform open wounds into dormant scars that only hurt when the weather is about to change. Today, I think of him with a kind of distant pity, a man so small inside that he needed to destroy others to feel big. My father, that's more difficult. I can't think of him without a shiver of repulsion, without that sensation of rough hands on my skin. But I understand now that he too was a product of a sick world, of a culture that teaches men to possess instead of love, to control instead of respect. What I've learned in these almost 80 years of life is that nobody is just one thing. My mother, apparently weak and submissive, hid within herself a lioness capable of killing to protect her cub. Joseph, the loving father, harbored a monster of envy and resentment. My father, respected in the community, carried a darkness that only revealed itself behind closed doors. And me? Am I the frightened girl who lost her daughter? The betrayed woman who lost her husband? The horrified daughter who lost her innocence? Or am I the fierce mother who would do anything to protect her son? The cold strategist who planned a revenge for years? The survivor who rebuilt life from ashes? The truth is that I am all of these. We are all a complex mixture of light and shadow, of strength and weakness, of love and hate. What's important is which of these facets we choose to feed, which we allow to grow and flourish. I chose life, with all its imperfections, its injustices, its pains. I chose to raise my son to be a different man from those who hurt me. I chose to transform my pain into strength, my tragedy into wisdom, my suffering into compassion for those who suffer. If I'm telling this story today after so many years of silence, it's because I feel other women need to hear it. They need to know they're not alone, that others have walked through the valley of the shadow and survived. That it's possible to start over, even when it seems like the world has ended 3 times in a single day. My dear viewers who've stayed with me until now, thank you so much for your patience, for listening to this difficult, heavy story. Each of you who watched until the end, who didn't look away from my pain, helped me carry a little bit of this burden. And for that, I am eternally grateful. If this story touched your heart, please leave your like and share it with someone you think needs to hear it. Maybe a woman going through difficult times, maybe a young person who needs to understand the impact of violence on the lives it touches. If you can, also subscribe to the channel to follow more stories of resilience like this one. God bless each one of you and your families. And if you're going through difficult times now, remember the words of this old woman who has seen it all. The darkest night also comes to an end. The sun always rises again.